Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to On the Pulse. It is episode 15, where we are going to be breaking down everything from Mesa, Arizona tour stop number 2. And I'm delighted to be joined by two of the best men in the business. It is Seth Page and Tommy Marquez, our resident analysts. Gents, I have not seen you for a few weeks now. What have you been up to apart from renovating houses that we heard all about on the women's preview?
Seth?
Well, okay. I've been doing some coaching. I have a lot of one-on-one athletes that when I travel for these big events, I have to leave behind. So, getting a lot more sessions with my local community and getting them as fit as possible.
I am working on getting my son as fit as possible because he's right about first steps mode. So that's been the focus of our intense training, which involves, toys and pushing, laundry baskets across the floor. So,
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I'm with you there too. Well, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, complete flip reverse that. I went straight into another competition. So I've been at the Belgrade Games. We just saw Luka Dukic take the podium. Obviously, it's in his backyard. I think that was a super emotional and really beautiful moment. And then on the girls' side, it was a great battle with Nikki here after taking quite a substantial time away from the sport, coming back and to take a win there. And Rebecca Viterson won the final event, which had legless rope climbs. So there was a huge redemption moment for Viterson as well. So it was a really beautiful weekend. Rubbing shoulders with Brent Fakowski, who came over to join us, and the local Serbian community. It was really good fun. But
awesome.
We're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about the World Fitness Project tour stop number 2. Let's take a little look at those results, because it was a big weekend full of action and some super impressive performances. Roman Krenikov right there on the top. Seth, big picture, what stands out?
Well, you just said it. Roman Krenikov on the top. Very, very impressive showing for him this weekend. But also, you look down at leaderboard and you see a lot of the usual suspects: James, Pat, Dallin, Ricky. Pat with a nice come up from the last one. But Jason Hopper down at 8th place, coming off a CrossFit Games victory, is a little bit interesting. And then Austin Hatfield right below him after a Tour Stop 1 victory. So 2 guys we thought would probably be on the podium, barely crack into the top 10.
Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I just feel like this entire men's field, the weekend coming out of Tour Stop 2, just the word resilient stands out to me.
Yeah.
Like seeing all the different comebacks and athletes that were able to battle back either on an event, workout to workout basis, or Tour Stop 1 to Tour Stop 2 basis, or just maybe reproving to themselves that they're capable of what their expectations have been across their career. So like that's maybe a little bit more big picture, but that's kind of what sticks out in the forefront of my mind.
You know what? And on that line of thought, Jonakowski, yes, he's down there in 28th position, of course, the weekend, but he flew out days after his partner gave birth to their first ever baby. That commitment to the sport and kind of what they've always done. When you talk about resilient, I'm not sure it gets more resilient than that. And he had a smile on his face the entire time. So, yeah, our men's field resilience, I definitely think, is kind of like a forefront emotion when I look at that group. But we're going to start right at the top, Seth. Roman Krenikov, after years of trying to get that one big top step performance, he pulled it all together that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been in the mix. He's always been someone that we've considered to be a podium threat. But honestly, very rarely do people pick him to win the event, especially in a field this deep. So it was good to see him kind of start out hot. He actually surprised maybe a couple of people in the run. I know he's a good runner, but he's just a bigger athlete. And against this depth of field, coming in the top 3 is very impressive. But what's more impressive is he was in first after day 1, and he had a decent little point lead. And people were talking about, okay, we've kind of seen this before. Is he going to be able to hold on, or the rest of the workout's going to knock him down a little bit? No. He held on the entire weekend. Basically, almost a wire-to-wire finish at the top of the leaderboard, something we haven't seen from him really before. And that might not be the last time we see something like this. I just feel like we saw not a new Roman, but a re-inspired Roman. And again, these wins are the things that kind of pick people up and give them new motivation. So, yeah.
What was really interesting about that was I was chatting to the Mayhem team coming into the final day. And they had said that he'd practically taken the entire week off following the CrossFit Games, if not longer. Like he hadn't done any training in the kind of immediate build up to World Fitness Project. Whereas I think others felt that they needed to train through. And I wonder whether that had something to do with his ferocity on the floor. Yeah, but it was just a little interesting insight and tidbit into everyone's different approaches and how it kind of played out off the back of the CrossFit Games. James Sprague, though, he's been second twice. He is just this absolute like phenomenon at the moment. You know, he's just super powerful, in super competitive, lovely bloke, and he's just getting better and better and better.
Yeah, and you know, I had a convo with some veteran athletes on the floor after the event. You know, all of them seem to agree that when you talk in terms of consistency across multitude of events for this calendar year, they truly believe that he's the best in the sport right now. You look at him, you know, coming off a win in 24 games. There were some question marks around that. Comes back, backs it up with a win at Wadapalooza, podiums at WFP 1 and 2. He podiums at the games. He's the overall points leader for the season at World Fitness Project for the men right now. And even down to the granularity of, he had the single most impressive performance, I think, across the entirety of the weekend at Tour Stop 2, absent of Colton Merton's strict handstand push-ups. In Pro 5, he won that workout going away ahead of a ton of other athletes that had gymnastics backgrounds. And when he got off the final pirouette, he stood up and was pumping up the crowd. He wasn't even breathing heavy. Given what he was holding on the Concept 2 bike, how he manhandled those heavy dubs, his conditioning and aerobic conditioning on that test alone was head and shoulders above everyone else in the field. And it was almost shocking to see how he just casually strolled to the finish line for a win in that one. And I think there's definitely credence to the idea that he's one of the best, if not the best in the sport on the men's side in terms of longevity and consistency across the calendar year.
And I'll say that he is the only athlete, and I'll say this with confidence, he is the only athlete in the men's field that the programming doesn't matter. Everybody else's placing on the leaderboard is very dependent on the workouts that come out. He has shown over the last 18 months that does not matter. You put out any 5 to 12 workouts, and he is going to be a top 3 guy every single time, it seems like. And so I just don't think there's anyone else in the field you can say that about.
And he's not just doing the sport of, you know, competitive fitness, functional fitness. Like he's come and done a high rocks and been just shy of an hour on his first attempt. He's gone off and done like triathlon, and he fits that in as part of his like wider training and can take on these kind of challenges. And I'm not going to say cruise them, but like very much kind of find a place amongst them. He's like such a well-rounded, exciting athlete to watch. Can he, Seth, win the final? Does he even need to?
Can he? Of course he can.
Sorry,
what are we
stupid
talking
question.
about here? What are we
Stupid
talking
question.
about here? No, in all seriousness, again, kind of like we had a tough time in the previous show betting against Laura. I think it's even harder to bet against James when you have this many events that we're going to expect more so than the Tour Stop 1 and 2. You know, probably be 3 to 4 more workouts we'll see in the final, whatever it is. You're just not going to find, I mean, you saw the graphic earlier, you're just not going to find that many weaknesses that's going to put him down the leaderboard. And so what we have seen, especially in the second Tour Stop, is that the field's so good that the rest of the points are getting all cut up amongst the rest of the guys. We have some guys that'll take second and third here and there, but they'll also take a 25th. And so the points get spread out so much. James doesn't really have too many of those issues. So he's not finishing down the 20s often at all. And he has the home run hitting ability where he's winning workouts. And so that's just a dangerous combination where those points stack up. And the more and more events you give James, the more points he's going to stack against the field. And it being the big fat lead he has going into the finals, I just don't see how someone's going to close that gap on him. Again, anything can happen, but if I was a betting man, and I am, my money would be on James.
Yeah, right. So that brings us to a slightly more unlikely podium finisher of the weekend, but in the best possible way, Pat Vellner.
Oh my goodness, as I love to call him, Uncle Pat. When you get to a certain point in sports and you have that much experience, the young guns start looking at the other guy and they call him Unc. And I think Pat's earned that nickname. And in my opinion, Pat is probably one of the top 4 male athletes in the history of the sport, with countless podium finishes and victories at Rogue, podium finishes at the games. I mean, we just saw kind of an unusual situation for Pat. Tour stop 1. We weren't sure if his preparation was off, if he was under the weather, or if father time was actually catching up with him. Turns out that's not the case. Pat came out basically from the start, had actually a really strong finish on the first workout for him. I think he was 11th place on the run. And typically what we've seen in normal Pat fashion is that he comes out and bombs the first event no matter what he's doing. He's always climbing up from the bottom, a bad start, but that didn't really happen here. He got himself into the top heat early on, and then he just continued to push. We saw, classic Pat. Yeah, good to see. This is kind of what you would expect to see from him normally.
Sorry. Classic working from home. My dog is just having a moment. But I retract my statement. I said the most unlikely podium finish of the weekend. And I don't think actually you ever say that about Pat Vellner. It's only off the back of Tour Stop 1 that this question's even really been raised. What I found really interesting is when I interviewed him on that subject, basically he had said that they had really readjusted how he trained for Tour Stop number 2. And he had taken a real step back from intensity and volume. And if anything, and almost not dissimilar to Roman doing it off the back of the games, having a slightly kind of like lower work rate coming into the tour, like helped him out when it came to execution on the day, which I find really interesting. So, Tommy, when you're thinking with the finals in mind and Pat Vellner back to podium potential, how dangerous can you be?
I think what we saw on Tour Stop 2 is how dangerous he can be, moving forward. And I think you bring up a great point about the adjustment. I think Pat's superpower above everything else is his ability to not let his ego or let ego in general get the best of him. And we talk about it all the time at our affiliates and gyms that like you check your ego at the door. Pat does that as well as any athlete has ever done it across his career, meaning that when he has a bad finish, he doesn't let it get to him. He's unafraid to take a chance and he's unafraid to fail. He even said it in this last one. He's like, I don't care if I look like an idiot. I don't care about that. I'm going to go down swinging and then take a couple of shots on these final few days and see if I can claw my way back into a podium contention. And that's what he did. And I think that comes with age, that comes with maturity, that comes with time spent out on the competition floor, seeing the highs and lows. And eventually, like, you don't worry about, that kind of, I say ego-driven performances where you're so scared that to look bad or look dumb or fail that it ultimately prevents you from reaching your potential. And it's funny because hearing you talk about Uncle Pat and being the wily old vet reminds me of a scene from the movie Secondhand Lions where Robert Duvall has been talking about all his war stories over the years. And finally he's sitting at the bar and these young guns come up in the car and they're crazy a ruckus. And Robert Duvall kind of gets off the bar stool and kind of cracks his neck and then shows the young guns that he can still, whip them up when he needs to. And I think Pat relishes that role and he fits that role beautifully. And to me that's another phase of his career, even as it starts to wind down, that, hey, I may not be good all the time, but I can still tune it up with the best of them. And it's brings a smile on my face for sure.
I'm just going to say one more thing really quick about Pat, and you made a ton of really good points about him. But one of the things that stands out is he's not, like you said, he's not afraid to look stupid. He's not afraid to take chances, but that's different for somebody with his level of experience. So when a young guy thinks about that, they think, oh, I'm going to take chances. I'm coming out at 100 miles an hour and I'm going to smash this and whatever happens, happens. That's not Pat taking chances. Pat is extremely experienced, extremely deliberate. And his chances are, I'm going to break this workout up a certain way because I think this maximizes my time. And that's the chance, is not coming out hot and getting sucked into the event. He showed that in workout 3 where he put on just an unbelievable performance, and just that's the classic Pat that you want to see. So his experience is what allows him to take those chances. And he just put it on display that weekend. So
in a pretty spectacular way. Speaking of experience, and going back into this segment of stock up, stock down, people that maybe had a really impressive performance in one and not the other tour stop. And I think, Seth, Noah Olsen, maybe off the back of Tour Stop 1, surprised in Misa to a certain extent. But also brand new dad. There's a lot going on. And it wasn't like it was a poor finish, but you've got to life is involved nowadays for Noah.
Yeah, you got to give him a little bit of a buffer, knowing he just became a brand new dad, similar to Janikowski. But I will say, I do think that I talked about James being non-dependent on programming. I think Noah is quite dependent on programming. And so when you start to see in Tour Stop 2, a few more machines or higher power output workouts kind of built in, that's not going to be his strong suit. He's really, really good at gymnastics. He's pretty good at cycling a barbell. But the things that made the biggest difference, I think, were that sustained higher power output. And I think that was just his downfall. So I don't think that he necessarily underperformed where he's at. I just think that the two Tour Stops probably leveled out where he's currently at versus the field.
And Tommy, trending in the opposite direction in a pretty big way was Anil Akai, who had possibly the worst Tour Stop 1 of nightmares and is right back in the thick of things when we were in Misa.
I think this last Tour Stop was a huge growth point for Anil. I think it was probably the most impressive performance of his career when you look at the field that he was competing with and the depth of field, and then you start to kind of tie that together with how he performed at Wodapalooza earlier this year, and I think this is starting to be the culmination of what a lot of people over in Europe had hoped could be the potential for him as an athlete. You look at his career performances, and he spent a lot of time competing in Europe in quote unquote international competitions like Dubai, that tend to favor and focus in recent years more towards the European contingent. And then you zoom out a little bit and see how he was able to stack up some impressive performances at Wodapalooza SoCal last year, Wodapalooza Miami this year, and Tour Stop 2. And I think that he is starting to set himself up as to be that strong, consistent presence towards the top of the leaderboard from the Spanish contingent of athletes. That, quite honestly, is a little surprising that we haven't had that from them, because the Spanish community is so well ingrained and has such a strong base of gyms and people training over the years. It's a little surprising that it's taken this long to have someone like Anil, or potentially have a top 10 caliber athlete perennially from that group. So for them to finally do it, and for, I think, Anil to set himself up to be that athlete, to me is just the next level of development for an athlete.
And actually to do that in a year where he's changed coaching camps from like a location that he'd been in for a very long period of his career. He's now working alongside Amy Kringle and Fraser McKenzie. And I think to go to Tour Stop 2 and to see that much development probably reinstates his faith in what he's doing is working and elevating him to the next level, which is really cool to see because he's an absolute beast. Speaking of beasts, I don't know why I used that as a transition. Tudor Magda, like he's had, like from the challenger competition and now leveling up onto the pro floor, and it was a performance to write home about, Seth.
Yeah. Tour Stop 1, he was a challenger, very much capped in the points he could earn. So he knew Tour Stop 2 would have to be much greater opportunity to get to the finals. And he took advantage of that big time. So he took 10th overall after having a very tough day one, not a super strong runner versus the field. And so I think one of the biggest traits that people are pretty confident with Tudor is his mental fortitude. And so the guy is like laser focused on competition weekend, almost emotionless in a sense. He's just super focused on the job. And so it didn't matter that he was already in that bottom heat after the first workout. He pushed really hard. He knew he had to accumulate points. He had better workouts coming. He knew that. He cleaned 407, cleaned over 400 pounds to score some points there. And in his final 4 workouts, he had 3 top 5 finishes. And so that's a heck of a way to close out a weekend, especially at a tough start and against a much harder field than he had to go against in Tour Stop 1. So those finishes easily moved him up into a finals qualifying position. And frankly, he just looked good. He looked sharp. He didn't look like there was any games hangover or anything like that. So yeah, solid weekend for Tudor.
Yeah, amazing weekend. Now, they are amongst the challenger qualifiers that are going to be going to Copenhagen. Shall we take a little look at the rest of them? Because there are some big names in that group. Like, look at strength of the field, Tommy. Talk me through it.
Well, experience stands out. I mean, there's a ton of high level competition experience amongst this Copenhagen Challenger qualifier group. And so much so at a multitude of levels, whether it's as individuals or as teenagers. To me, that it signals that like what you had kind of hoped from this challenger division, right? Gives opportunity for athletes like Ty Jenkins, like Jack Farlow, like Nate Ackerman that are on the rise, even a Tudor or you even Jack that maybe have a games appearance under their belt and are working on the consistency level, or someone like Chris Ibarra who broke through the top echelon in the elite division and is now trying to build consistency there. So for me, I look at that group and I'm like, I don't know if they're going to be in this position long because they're handful of them are already in a position based on points. If they hold firm in their position to earn a pro card, and I think that's just the beginning.
And unless I'm mistaken, I believe 8 out of 10 of these athletes have been prior CrossFit individual games athletes. I'm talking about 8 out of 10 in the challengers were games athletes. That's how deep this field is. So that's just some perspective for you in terms of how things can shift around quite quickly.
It's pretty amazing, really, when you think about the depth of the field in general. But guys, we're going to park that. Congratulations to all of the challengers who we're going to be seeing in Copenhagen. But before we round out this show, final opportunity to let us know who is your eye on that we've not talked about already. Tommy, kick us off.
For me, it's the Prince of the Pacific, as our good pal Jeremy Austin.
Is that what we call him?
Yep, it is. It's none other than Jay Crouch. Jay has built a level of consistency at the top of the sport that I think often gets overlooked because he gets to play second fiddle sometimes to Ricky Garrard. And all he really does is just rack up top tens. And even look at the last circuit of major competitions. He was second at Tour Stop 2, sixth at Tour Stop 2, sixth at the Games, seventh at Tour Stop 1, sixth at Rogue. And since 2022, he's finished in the top 10 in 9 of the 10 major in-person competitions that he showed up to. So when he shows up in person, he competes with the best of the sport, and you can pretty much bank on him being in the final heat. The one thing that he's missing, though, is the podium at the major international competition, which is why I think he gets overlooked by Ricky when compared to Ricky, because Ricky can burn as hot as any athlete in the sport can at times and get that podium finish. And to me, it's really two different types of race car. Ricky is the drag racer, and Jay's more the NASCAR. It's like, what are you looking at? Are you looking at fast and quick, or a little bit more consistency over the long haul? Because we do see those fluctuations from Rick, and that's why I think it doesn't always get as rewarded as much in the sport, but it's certainly worth giving some accolades to and some attention to in Jay and how consistent he's been over the years.
Oh, 100%. And when you consider all of that Aussie contingent and how they have to adapt their entire life around competition, it's not like they're going home and having the luxury of just a short flight, is it? Or being able to stay in their own bed. They're having to recamp their lives for months at a time to the US. And I mean, when you talk about having a stable background and being able to perform at your best because you've got a nice stable home life, they don't have any of that. They're against adversity every step of the way before they even get to the competition floor.
Yep.
What about you, Seth? Who have you got?
Well, I'm looking at the highest placing challenger, Colton Mertens. He took first at Tour Stop. First in Tour Stop 1. He took 9th. In Tour Stop 2, he took 11th. So kind of balanced out as a top 10 guy right there coming out of the challenger division. What you notice with his Tour Stop 2 finishes is that he's a bit of a home run hitter, right? He's got 2 first place overall in the high rep handstand push-up workout, in the high rep muscle up workout. He's also pretty good at cycling a barbell. He also cleaned over 400 pounds in 4A. So, but the issues you see now, the 20th place finishes. So a lot of those things are higher sustained, higher power output style workouts. It's only so much Colton can do in terms of having advantages there, as he's a shorter height, shorter limbed athlete. And so when it comes to just raw mechanics, he won't have the advantage there. Now, having said all that, I like to highlight Colton because Colton's the type of athlete that does not make excuses for that stuff. He's not just rolling over and saying, I'll never be good at that stuff. In his interviews, his in the podcast, he loves to say things. He loves to call his shots, put stuff out there, but he'll say things like, I just have to get better at this, or I have to work on that, or me and my coach are improving on that. And he's always got kind of the cliche way of saying it, the growth mindset, right? He really does have that. He's not afraid to talk about the things he's not good at, but he's also not afraid to say, I am going to get better at that. I am going to improve on that. And so when you have those home run hitting abilities, like he won workout 2 by like 2 minutes, which is, I can't even, I think if you haven't seen it, you can't even fathom how impressive that is. Won it by 2 minutes. If he can just get mid-pack on some of those higher power output things, his scores will just rocket him up the leaderboard overall. And that's just all he's missing. And he's well aware of it. He's not afraid to put in the work, and he's not discouraged by that at all. So I like Colton long-term. I like him this season, and I like him in future seasons to come because he's all in on this.
Yeah. Big Colton Mertens fans over here, I think. Because he's been brilliant to watch at both tour stops. And obviously his entire career so far to date. My person I'd like to highlight is Dallin Pepper, like also big Dallin Pepper fan. 5th at tour stop 1, 4th at tour stop 2, but that's what's important, because at the close of day 1 he was in 26th place, and that is not 2 things you ever put side by side when it comes to Dallin Pepper. But WFB has a 100-point per workout system in the pro division. That maybe an event win that he did on like E3 and a couple of high place finishes, it can swing points. But to actually go and execute that, knowing that's one thing, but to actually execute under pressure and to come back with the curve that he had is a very different thing entirely. And I mean, we spoke to him a number of times over the weekend because of this steep trajectory that he was on in terms of a comeback run. He closed out the last 3 events with a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 2nd. Like, the consistency that exists in this man's capacity is amazing. He's got the top end barbell strength, good, and well, I say good, incredible power output. He's great. These like mixed engine pieces, and honestly, just the composure that he showed after such a brutal start, and to like openly admit and talk about it, because he talked us through with him. Every time we interviewed him, we heard a little bit more kind of about his mindset on the journey back to the top. I mean, the silver, like the kind of the best thing that could have happened really would be him finishing on a podium, and he was only moments, like he was points away from that happening. And I just think that Dallin Pepper, alongside people like you mentioned, like James Sprague, he's going to be serious metal, not just in Copenhagen, but any competition he enters. To come back from 26th, totally wild in every single possible way. But yes, let's take a little look though at the full 30 people who are going to be joining us in Denmark at Christmas time. It's not a bad list, is it, gents?
Oh my goodness. Look at the top though. How are people going to catch James? I mean, we do have Roman, Austin, Downs, you just named, Jason Hopper, CrossFit Games champ currently. They're in the top 5. But the more we expand this competition out, the more we just let James earn points. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how the programming comes out. If the programming turns out to be a balance of tour stop 1, tour stop 2, in terms of movements, power versus endurance, like all those things, I think that favors a couple athletes in particular, the most well-rounded. But what you're seeing here is a culmination of 14 total workouts, which is obviously more than we're going to see in a final overall. So unless something strange happens, like you're starting to see a preview of where these athletes are at, if that makes sense. Like we've already put 2 tests out there where they've gone through that, and this is where they ended up. So to think we're going to have something drastically different in the finals is tough. Not to say that's not going to be exciting, because each event's worth that much more. Mistakes happen, and at the highest level, it's not always about who's fittest, but about who executes best on game day. And so that's where I think you see the big shifts in the top 10 or so, is who shows up in Copenhagen ready to execute when it counts. And because we see such a depth of field, like what am I going to say? Like anything can happen, just as it happened in the last tour stop.
Agreed. And it stands to be reminded, like, we have not seen this specific group of 30 on the competition floor together in the same division, because we did have athletes filtering in and out of the challenger division, and we did have athletes from the challenger division, albeit with slightly adjusted tests, putting up competitive scores with the pros. So that, to me, that just adds a little intrigue to where if you do slip up, there's more athletes that, like Jack Farlow, who wasn't in the pro division in Tour Stop 1, could maybe, catch you on a heavy lift event, or even go down at 30th. Jeff Adler wasn't at Tour Stop 2. If he's back and he's healthy, he's going to be in the mix. And that's another person that, if you're looking at what you said for James, could punish you if you make a slip up and put space between you and them on the leaderboard.
Yeah, well, I think that's what happens, though. Are those people down in that bottom 10, those challengers, they're going to be fighting for those pro cards, right? So that you could see how tight it was on that graphic from 21st to 30th. But the issue is a lot of those, if we're talking about realistically, like winning the finals, going on a podium, they're not in real contention. Even Jeff, who's one of the best in the world, would need so many more points to beat out those guys in the top 10. So what we're talking about, I think, is him creating that gap between others, right? So there's enough talent on there, even those who may not earn pro cards, that they're going to slide in between some of those higher level athletes and create a much larger point gap on these workouts. So that's what I think makes it very interesting. Not to mention, those bottom 10 are going to be clawing for points. They want those guaranteed events next year with that tour card. They don't want to go through the qualifiers again. So like, they have a lot to fight for. Maybe they might have more to fight for than the athlete in 12th place overall going into the finals, right? They might just be trying to hold on, knowing they can't make too much of a drive up, but they probably can't fall too far either. So you take advantage of people where they're on the leaderboard and what their intentions are and what their goals are. I think it's going to be quite interesting.
It's going to be a spectacular watch. Literally for those reasons, I feel like that battle for the pro card is an entire competition in itself, right? And we'll be looking at like the first heat and the second heat with as much interest as the people who are going to take the overall podium at the end of the weekend. So yeah, can't wait to get stuck in. Guys, Hereon wraps up our coverage of Tour Stop number 2. But before we go, a little reminder about tickets. There is your QR code, ladies and gentlemen, December 18th to the 21st, Christmas in Copenhagen in Denmark. There's also a couple of wonderful gyms in the city if you want to get a little bit of fitness on. It is going to be truly spectacular. And if you do not know, they have some world-renowned Christmas markets at that time of year as well. So treat yourself to a holiday. And rumor has it, many of the best athletes in the entire world are going to be there. I mean, it's not really a rumor, is it? But yeah, scan that QR code, get your tickets, and we will see you on the streets of Copenhagen in Denmark, and it's going to be spectacular. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us for On the Pulse. It's always a pleasure. Thanks to Tommy and to Seth, and we will see you next time. Bye.